A group of Florida teens embroiled in a love triangle settle their differences with their fists, but the juvenile spat takes a deadly turn.
What started out as a bunch of kids going to go up there and be a thug, going to be a tough person, turned into a murder. A murder.
And that murder was also caught on tape. This church van, seen driven by 18-year-old Elijah Stanzel, the teen throwing the punches in the earlier attack, would run over the woman standing in front of it, the 52-year-old mother of his beating victim. She would later die from her injuries.
Elijah Stanzel runs over her, completely over her. She has tire tracks on her body where he runs totally over her.
Stanzel is now one of 4 teenagers who are charged as adults in connection with the murder. The murder victim is beloved Polk City librarian Suzette Penton. Authorities say the incident started as a quarrel between Penton's son Hunter and his ex-girlfriend, 16-year-old Kimberly Stone. The conflict escalated. Eventually, Stone was suspended from school for threatening Hunter Penton. Fast forward to November 9th. Authorities say Stone and her new boyfriend, Elijah Stanzel, show up at the victim's house to, quote, handle the dispute. Stanzel borrowed the church van you see in this surveillance video from his father, a pastor. Kimberly Stone, 16-year-old Raven Sutton, and 14-year-old Hannah Eubank go along for the ride.
Hunter has no idea that they're coming up there to fight him. When he comes out the side door, Elijah immediately confronts him in the carport and starts beating him up.
This video, taken by one of the teens, captures the violent attack. Hunter Penton is punched repeatedly. He then manages to retreat inside his home, where the attack continues. At that moment, Penton's mom, Suzette, returns home, scaring off the suspects. The 52-year-old librarian then confronts the teens, stepping in front of the van, snapping pictures of the attackers with her phone. Then, the unthinkable happens. Stanzel steps on the gas and runs her over.
He didn't clip her. He didn't try to turn away from her and accidentally hit her and she fell down. She was squared up and he ran over her, directly over her, rolled her underneath the van.
Witnesses called 911 and the teens were quickly apprehended. Penton died 16 days later from her injuries. Now, 18-year-old Elijah Stanzel is facing first-degree murder charges. His 15-year-old girlfriend, Kimberly Stone, along with 14-year-old Hannah Eubank and 16-year-old Raven Sutton, are all charged as adults with attempted murder. Friends and family of Suzette Penton are left to mourn her loss.
She always went above and beyond. You can see here, and if you go on the Facebook pages, her different faces as she would dress up and paint up as she had programs for the young children in and around Polk City. She was known and loved by the people of Polk City. She was also known as a protective mother.
And she was a mother, and there she was trying to protect her son, you know, gets the kids out of the house and then wants to get some evidence of it because probably wants those kids prosecuted so they won't bother her son anymore, and she loses her life. Completely senseless. Let's bring in Court TV anchor Michael Ayala. Michael, you know, you look at this and you think back to your days of youth. You understand, you know, the passion of, you know, boyfriends, ex-boyfriends. You told on me, you got me in trouble. But this thing spiraled way, way beyond anything. What kind of kids are these?
You know, Vinny, you know, I agree with this case. It's just incredible, hard to believe. But with the exception of one of them, none of them really had any criminal records. Now, the youngest one there, 14-year-old Hannah Eubank, she had been charged at one point with using a fake ID, but that's it. Stanzel was the son of a pastor. And the other two really hadn't been in any trouble at all. The ex-girlfriend, she had just been suspended from school because of issues with Penton, but not much else. Now, in his press conference, the sheriff clearly didn't like Hannah Eubank, the youngest one. He didn't like her attitude at all. He mentioned her bad attitude a few times, but that's really it, Vinny. This one's really hard to explain, but I will tell you this. The younger ones are lucky because Stanzel was charged with first-degree murder, and they very easily could have been charged with first-degree felony murder as well, but only charged with attempted felony murder. So they can at least count themselves lucky on that part.
Yeah, I would charge them all.
I agree.
So you've got a 14, a 15, and a 16-year-old that are all going to adult court. How do they make that determination down in Florida? Because it really varies from state to state.
It does. Now, Vinny, first of all, it's not surprising that Florida actually leads the nation in transferring youths to adult courts. So not surprising here that it ended up there. Now, as long as the defendant is 14 or older, there are basically three ways that a case can go from juvenile court to adult court. There's direct filing by the prosecutor. A judge can make the determination based on motions or an indictment by a grand jury. Now, in this case, once the victim died, the case was filed directly in adult court. Now, direct filing is generally within the discretion of the prosecutor, and he or she will go directly to adult court. In some instances, based on the criminal history of the defendant, it is mandatory the prosecutor file in adult court. Now, also, if a defendant is 16 or over and charged with a felony, again, that case will end up in court. But that's not the case here, right? Generally, there are four factors when you don't have those things when making the decision if you want to move it from juvenile to adult court. The first one is the seriousness of the offense. The second one is the sophistication and maturity of the child. The third is the record and previous history of the child. And the fourth is whether the alleged offense was committed in an aggressive, violent, premeditated, or willful manner. Now, the Department of Juvenile Justice, they'll prepare a report for the court addressing those exact factors, and then a determination will be made. Now, Vinny, you probably know this very well. The transfer to adult court is significant. It makes for major changes in how a defendant is treated by the court. So take a look here. Now, in juvenile court, youths can only be held for 21 days before being released to await trial. Of course, not the case in adult court. Now, in juvenile court, you're not subject to monetary bail. It's significant here because in adult court, they were denied bond, so they cannot be free. They would have been free had they been charged as juveniles. Now, as far as sentencing goes, probation can only last until 19 if they were lucky enough to get probation, and commitment in jail only until 21. And of course, you've got the difference between juvenile detention and big boy prison. And then finally, a judge decides the facts in juvenile court, while a jury does, of course, in adult court.
You know, as I sit here tonight, I can hear already in the opening statement of the defense attorney that this was a terrible, terrible accident. But when you look at that video, and I'm talking about not the video of the attack inside, right? When they get into the church van and drive away, I mean, I think I'm with the sheriff on this one. It's difficult to say or to explain this as an accident because of her position. I mean, she is right in front of it. I mean, unless he's not looking at the road.
Yeah, see, that's where I would go with it. I'm going to look at it now, Vinny, as a defense attorney, right? If I'm arguing on behalf of Stanzel there, the driver, you see the car begins moving just before she gets in front of it. He may have been looking around. He's obviously sort of hyped up after this fight or this beating that just took place. Maybe he didn't see her until the last minute. But here's the deal. I think even after he sees her or feels, he doesn't stop. He just keeps going, and it's horrendous. And I think he's going to have a really hard time getting out from under this charge.
Yeah, and I already hear the second part of that argument. Yes, it was an accident, but then he panicked. He didn't know what to do, and I've heard that a million times. I think the real problem they're going to have is with the first video, right? Because this is a planned and premeditated attack on this young boy inside his house, and it was a brutal, brutal attack.
Yeah, it was clear, Vinny, that they conspired together. In the prosecutor's words, they conspired together. That Stone basically told them where he lived, took them over there, pointed him out. They went and did what they did. Actually, the ex-girlfriend stayed in the car, according to prosecutors. They then, committed a battery, which is a felony. Now, as a continuation of this felony, this death occurred. That is murder, Vinny, as we well know, felony murder, right? There's no question there. Think about it as a robbery. If you go in to rob a store and someone else gets killed during that robbery, even if you're the driver, you can be charged with murder. So again, as I said earlier, the younger defendants in this case, lucky that they weren't charged with murder, only attempted murder. And
this is a case, for defendants, a lot of times you're like, okay, who's going to try to get the deal? I don't think you get a deal from any of them. I mean, you've got both parts of this are on video. It's super clear. they probably gave some level of a statement to investigators, and it seems like they can put this case together without having to give any sort of a plea offer to any of the four.
Yeah, a lot of factors working against a deal in this case, Vinny. The one you just mentioned, the fact that this is a very provable case without anyone turning against the others. And the other is the person who this was, who was murdered, and the way they were revered in the community. This is a very small community, according to the sheriff. Everyone loved the victim in this case. This community is clamoring for justice. Another little tidbit is when this happened, there was someone working nearby. He actually jumped in their truck and followed the van so that police could find the van and arrest these kids. Very close-knit community. So I just can't see a deal being made in this case at all.
Yeah, and then you look at the aggravating factor of it's the pastor's church van.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Right? Borrows it from his dad, but his dad's a local pastor. So
Yeah.
I'm sure his dad is loved in the community and has lots of people there to support him, but it's difficult to support his son when the entire community can see what happened here and why it happened. I mean, it's one thing if you accidentally run into someone and then you panic and drive away, right? This one, they planned to go there to attack this kid, this young boy, and then they flee and they're trying to abscond from justice because they see mom has her camera out and is taking pictures of all of them. And boom, and then they run her over and inflict. I don't see anything that lessens it unless they just talk about the mere age of the defendants.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about their immaturity, you try to get that on your side, that works. But there's even this whole sort of long history between Stone and Penton where there's this social media history that leads to this thing. So there's clearly an intent there. So it's just a very difficult and ugly, ugly case. And we'll certainly be following it.
And I think about one more part of this, because obviously this is one we're going to track here at Court TV. If one reason maybe to give a deal is for that young boy, so he doesn't have to come into court because he's the first witness, right? He's the most important witness to testify about all that and to have to relive all that. Maybe that's one factor prosecutors would consider, but that's going to be tough for that young man.
One other thing, Vinny, quickly, he has a little brother who was with the mother when she arrived back. So he's one of the ones that he also gave a statement. His name was Hunter. He gave a statement to the police as well. So that's another reason why, if you could avoid going to trial in this case, you certainly would want to do that.
All right. Michael Ayala, a tragic story, but an important one. And of course, the case will continue to track here at Court TV. Thanks so much.